Welcome to another episode, and what an exciting episode it is. This episode marks our very first guest. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to make it today to the recording with Leo and Phil, but we couldn't be more thrilled to kick off one of our guest interviews with one of mine and Leo's favorite people in the world. And without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Leo and let him introduce Phil and kick it off.
Welcome to another podcast for Totten Training. And first of all, we have to say sorry that Cait couldn't make it today, but I'm sure she regrets missing this one because this will be a really good one. I also apologize for my voice. For some reason, I got some laryngitis type thing, so we'll muddle through this okay. And as long as Phil sounds good, that's the main thing. I did want to make sure that we're aware that a lot of people question. I know we're doing this with Totten Training, but also I was the founder and head coach of East Coast Gold, and we'll be talking about that a good bit. And that'll actually be on another podcast. So Phil doesn't know that yet, but we're grabbing him again. We're going to talk more about that, but I do want everybody to know that East Coast Gold is a separate entity. It's our not-for-profit. We have a team going since I started in 1992, still going strong. But Totten Training is now my training business, and so I kind of wear two hats. Mostly, we're going to be talking about coaching and training today. And if you notice, I have my East Coast Gold on, and wait a minute, it's on this arm. I have East Coast Gold on there, so I have to cover both bases. I just wanted to kind of clarify that right off the bat. But I'd like to welcome my buddy and oh God, we go way back, Phil Sabatini. If you guys don't know Phil, you must be living under a rock or something because Phil is the man. And I brag up on Phil all the time. And he's done a lot of really good stuff for me. We've been friends for years. The team he's done some wonderful things with. I'm just so happy for what he's done personally as well as with the team. But again, we'll talk more about East Coast Gold as the team as we go along a little bit. Obviously, that has to be part of it. But then we'll really hit on, how East Coast Gold started and what Phil's affiliation with that would be. So we'll get that in another podcast. But just wanted to introduce Phil and just kind of go into his history a little bit. And because a lot of people know of him, but they don't really know his background. And I think his background kind of lends itself to what other people can do in the sport and learn from that. And he may not be a direct mentor to you or a coach to you, but indirectly, I've had a lot of mentors in my life that they don't even know they were my mentor and helping me out. So Phil has done so many things, and I always brag him up that he has everything going. I mean, he's a smart guy. He teaches at a university. He's a good-looking guy. He's a great lifter, great family, plays in a band, sings in a band. Kind of pisses you off a little bit, actually. So many good things. But bottom line is he's just a good quality person. And that really kind of works with everything. So, Phil, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just what did you do in high school? Were you a very good athlete in high school?
Yeah, I played at every sport, growing up and into high school. I was quarterback, running back, safety, kicker, punter on the football team, and section champion wrestler. And then baseball was my main sport, which I played in college on a scholarship. And so very successful in that as well. So yeah, athletics has been a huge part of my life from as far back as I could remember, 4 years old.
Well, and I think it's important for people to realize that because we always talk about LTAD, long-term athletic development, and athletes when they're really young, specializing too early. I'm a big proponent of when they're young, play a lot of stuff. So it sounds like that is a big part of your background.
Definitely. Being a competitive weightlifter for so long, almost 20 years, I always, one of the most common questions that I'm asked is about my longevity and how I've been able to stay healthy and things like that. And people want a short-term answer, but really the answer is in how I was developed, from the time I was just a kid, and it still is such a big part of my life today.
And I think the coaches that are listening to this podcast, I think they could really take a lesson from that. If you're working with young athletes, let them have fun with lifting. Let them have fun. Let them play other sports. They don't need to specialize, at all until like an older age when they've really decided. But, when you see a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and they're, say, playing soccer year round and nothing else, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of overuse, injuries, burnout, and they're just not going to have the longevity. And I think you're a really prime example of if you want to last a long time as an athlete, there's a good way of doing it, and that is to be kind of well rounded.
Sure. Yeah, it starts very early, which is becoming harder and harder to do in today's day and age, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more about your college career, not only in baseball, but also how your strength and conditioning got started. I know Sonny Sano and Joe Fondale and those guys. If you can bring
Yeah.
those guys up.
I went to Ohio University on a baseball scholarship. I went to a really small high school, and we didn't have a weight room. We had one that was very small and no one really used except to take naps in between classes or during class even. But I had old school coaches, when I was in high school, and being a baseball guy and a quarterback, lifting weights was thought to be bad for you, and overhead athletes shouldn't be, lifting and doing stuff. So I didn't really have much experience in that until I got to college. And within the first week of being there, we had 6 a.m. weight training. And I walked into this huge facility with a ton of bumper plates and no machines or anything like that. And I was just like, holy cow, we had 4 full-time strength coaches on staff, and really opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And immediately I fell in love with it. And I had a lot of good mentorship along the way in there, and a lot of good strength and conditioning coaches that encouraged us and educated us. And I loved training as much as I loved the sport of baseball or playing the game of baseball. So those two went hand in hand. And as I got older, I realized I wanted to do that professionally. I wanted to be a strength coach. I wanted to impact people's lives. And I had a great mentor and 2 mentors in Sonny Sano and Joe Fondale, who got me started in that. And Joe Fondale was the one who got me interested in the sport of weightlifting. And so things really took off from there. While I was in college, 2 years in a row, I was an NSCA All-American, which they try to highlight those who do a really great job in the weight room while they're playing sports. And that was something I was really proud of. So that's what kickstarted everything for me. I wanted to be a strength coach and a good professional and impact people's lives. And Joe and Sonny and others had a huge impact in that. And Joe was the one who told me I needed to get my USAW level 1, and that's where we met, Leo. So the rest is history.
I just remember going to Ohio University and doing some courses there. I remember looking at that record board, and there's supposed to be all kinds of football players' names up there. But I kept seeing this Phil Sabatini's name up there, and I go, what the hell? This guy must be pretty good.
I loved it. I probably lifted a lot more than I should have. By the time I got to be junior and senior, I was a little too muscle bound and couldn't run as fast.
Don't bring that up now. I don't discourage you.
Well, here's the thing. I wasn't doing it the right way. I was doing a lot of bodybuilding, and I should have been doing a lot more power training and velocity training and things like that. And I just like to get in there and pound the weights a little bit. And it probably wasn't the smartest way of training, but I was super motivated and didn't know any better at the time. So.
Well, we all live and learn along the way, right? That's for sure. So tell me about your lifting career, because I just remember that meet in Pittsburgh. Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, first meet that I've ever done that Joe was really, encouraging me and a couple other guys at Ohio to do that were interested in training. And I didn't really have any expectations. At the time, was only about 6 months or so into actually doing snatch and clean and jerk like competitively. And I didn't really know how to perform the movements that well. I was just pretty powerful and was a good athlete. At that first meet, I power snatched 115, which is about 255 pounds, and I power clean and jerked 150, which is 330. Couldn't do the full movements yet, and that qualified me at the time for the American Open, and that was what really kickstarted things for me. And I thought, I might have a future in this sport, and I fell in love with it.
Well, I was there at that meet coaching my team and other people. And of course, Joe Fondale was one of my lifters. And if anybody doesn't know Joe, what a really good guy. He's at the Naval Academy. And he, at the time, he was in I think it was the 94 kilo class at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know how all those classes change. And I think he's done a 145 and 185, I believe. So he was a really good lifter himself.
He was.
And so he was one of my lifters. But he got you started, and he brought you to that meet. And I'm going, holy crap, this guy's got some power. He's got a lot of rough edges. Joe said he was really involved with what he was doing at the Naval Academy and I think it was Ohio University at the time. And so he asked me to take over your training, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
Yeah, I remember that conversation when we were done, and I just remember you saying, yeah, "I'm going to take him over," and I was just like, "Okay, this is awesome. This is getting serious, and I'm gonna dive in head first, like I like to do with a lot of different things." So,
well, you've had a pretty good lifting career. That's for sure. And again, that longevity. I mean, who else can say they're 41 years old and doing, the lifts that you're doing? I
that's
know
right.
you
I just turned 42.
Yeah, you were competing. You were still 41.
Yeah.
Doing, senior lifting with the younger guys and hanging right in there, and that's so impressive. And that's one of the things that longevity and just the desire. You can see that. Watching your training on social media, it's like you just love it. You're still doing it, even
Still
though you're
doing it.
retired. I think you're
Right.
retired, right?
That's right. Definitely retired.
Okay.
But I still love, and I always will love to lift and do the lifts,
Yeah.
and makes me whole.
I think that passion really shows. It really does. So just go into your coaching career a little bit, how you really got started. Did you coach anything else besides weightlifting coming in?
Yeah, my goal, I guess, was that I wanted to be a strength coach in professional baseball.
Okay.
And so after I graduated with my undergrad degree, I was really fortunate to have a connection with the Chicago Cubs. And then I was hired for 2 seasons with the Cubs as a strength and conditioning coach. And that was my first real job as a strength and conditioning coach.
How old were you at the time?
23 or 24.
Okay. Your lifting career hadn't really started at that
No,
point.
I had just started doing some training there. And I remember actually I was in spring training in Mesa, Arizona, and I missed the cutoff for registration for University Nationals. I don't know if you remember that, but I was supposed to do University Nationals that year. It would have been my second meet ever, second or third. And I missed the cutoff for registration, and I called you and I was asking if you could do anything about it, and you said no, and you were pretty upset with me about it.
I must not have been too upset because I don't remember.
Yeah, all right, that's good to know. I'll sleep better at night.
You're off the hook.
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't really start lifting competitively, very seriously then, although I wanted to, but time wouldn't allow for it. And the facilities with the Cubs, and a lot of times in professional baseball, didn't really have, what you need to do that. And, sometimes, unfortunately, they discourage you from doing those lifts too, because they don't want the players to do them and stuff. So, but to me, that would have been the perfect job for me. I love baseball. I love training and strength and conditioning, and being able to marry those two things was great. But after the second year, I realized that it really wasn't for me. A lot of traveling, not a ton of accountability with the players. You don't really get a lot of freedom in what you're doing. And that wasn't really the environment that I wanted to be in. And it wasn't the culture that I felt was best for my personality. So I decided, I wanted to get back in the collegiate level, that I could really have an impact on some of these student athletes, and was really fortunate to get a job at Virginia Military Institute as the head football strength and conditioning coach. I did that for 8 years, and that's really where
8 years. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And that's where I really felt like I developed as a strength coach. A lot of trial and error, a lot of mistakes I made and in different ways, and learned a lot of things and dealing with different athletes. And it was a great experience. And throughout all of that, we were training really hard. And that's when my weightlifting career really took off there. Just a little side note too, I think is a good story. I think in order to have success, you have to have really good people in your corner. That's something that you've always preached, Leo, and you continue to do so. And that is why East Coast Gold has always been so successful. In order to have the success that you want, everybody has to be all in. You have to be all in, the coaches are all in, and the people that support you have to be all in. And to me, there was no better example of that as to what you and I were doing at the time. It was like every 2 weeks, we decided we'd meet halfway, which was in Frederick, Maryland. I would drive 3 hours. You would drive 3 hours, and we would meet there for a session. I was getting up at like 3 a.m. to get there on time so that we could start lifting like 6, 7 a.m. so I could be back in time to coach the guys at VMI. And I mean, that says it all, coaches who are all in and athletes who are motivated and all in, and we were able to get it done, even though it required us both to take a pretty large chunk out of our day. And
yeah,
We did that. So always
We
super
both put
appreciative
some
of
miles
that.
on our car, didn't we?
There's no doubt about it, but
Yeah.
that's what it takes.
The one nice thing I always say about being a strength coach for football at VMI, I'm not knocking VMI, but fortunately for your lifting career, they weren't as successful like to go into playoffs and stuff.
Right.
So even though we had to kind of tailor your training around your football coaching aspects, we had to tailor that. But the nice thing is that once their season ended, okay, you had 3 or 4 solid weeks to get ready for American Open, and you kicked it, man. I tell you,
Yeah.
but that's where we had to just manipulate the workouts a little bit because
Yeah.
during the week and during the season, you just couldn't do as much. You're on your feet, 15 hours a day,
Yeah.
and how you supposed to train hard like that? So
Right.
we had to manipulate the training, but then as soon as that season was over, then we kicked it up a notch, and then boom. And
Yeah.
I think that's a good lesson for young coaches to realize is that, hey, you got to make the adaptations. You can't expect if somebody's working 50, 60 hours a week, you can't expect them to train 5, 6 days a week for 2 hours each.
Yeah.
You got to recover. You
I
did
wouldn't
that.
say I was really smart about it. You were really smart about it because if it were up to me, I would still try to train, but it wasn't getting done. The quality was very poor. And I'm thankful that you knew better, and held me accountable to do that.
And
It
the
could have
lift
been
showed it up then in the
sure.
competition.
Yeah, even training, 2 and 3 times a week, still making progress and in good shape to compete. So
Yeah. So, but you got to have the passion and the desire to do that, and you had that. So, let's talk a little bit more about your weightlifting coaching career. How did that get started, and how did you make a connection with CrossFit Rife? Well, first of all, how did you even get to Virginia Beach?
okay, after 8 years at VMI, challenges were pretty high. My wife and I had 2 girls at the time. I was traveling a lot. The pay wasn't great. As anybody who's in the strength and conditioning field knows, there's a lot of people that are overworked and underpaid. And it became really challenging, and I was getting burnt out. So I was really fortunate while I was at VMI that I had a chance to teach as an adjunct to make a little extra money in the physical education department. And I taught courses like weight training and wellness and principles of physical conditioning and things like that. I realized I really like to teach, and maybe that could be an avenue or an exit strategy for me to get out of the strength and conditioning field. Long story short, I interviewed at Old Dominion University and got a job as a non-research professor there, or teaching professor. And I've been there for 10 years now. And so that's what brought me to Virginia Beach. ODU's in Norfolk, but I live in Virginia Beach. And when I got there the first year, for strength and conditioning purposes, especially at the collegiate level, a lot of times the coaches aren't allowed to leave until the head coach leaves. So there were a lot of times where I'd be there till 8 o'clock or so until it was okay for me to go. At ODU, I had class 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock. And I was done teaching class, just sitting in my office, and the department chair came by and said, "What are you still doing here? Aren't your classes over?" I said, "Yeah, am I allowed to leave?" They said, "Yeah, get out of here." I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is awesome." So such a great job. But I had a ton of time, extra time that I wasn't used to having. And so not only did I start training again to compete, but I decided I was going to try to start a weightlifting team. And so I reached out to a handful of gyms in the area. There was one really small gym that was interested in starting something. And so we started with about 8 lifters, which soon grew to about 20. And we outgrew that facility, and there were some challenges within that small facility as well. So I reached out to the biggest gym in Virginia Beach to try to partner with them, and they accepted us with open arms. And we grew from 20 lifters to about 65 within 2 years, and have been pretty consistent there. And so that's how everything got started. And we started under the name the Barbell Syndicate, which was an affiliate of East Coast Gold at the time. And as we grew and grew, that's when Leo, approached me about taking on East Coast Gold and making our team here in Virginia Beach headquarters for East Coast Gold. And that's where we've been.
Yeah, we got to put a shout out to CrossFit Rife. They're the ones that really let you kind of get
Jason
started.
and Jess Fernandez.
You start with like 5 or 6 platforms, and then next thing you're expanding to a whole separate room.
Right.
With how many platforms do we have there?
14.
And it gets used, boy. I tell you.
Definitely.
We did want to have
they've been awesome. They have been so supportive and encouraging, and give us everything that we need. And It's a family there, just like East Coast Gold's a family. It was definitely the right partnership, which is really hard to do, but we've managed to do it really well.
Well, and I will say that it's a major compliment to you and your
To
staff
Jason,
and
yeah.
your people there. I mean, up until you guys took over, the headquarters for East Coast Gold was my house, and then we kind of worked our satellite centers and our affiliates around that, and just kind of reaching out and communication and everything. So I really wanted a location that would be a perfect fit, and you guys were a perfect fit. And you know this. I don't trust just anybody to take over a big part of my team. So that's a major compliment to you that I would do that. And it was a perfect fit. And this way I can back off a lot of the stuff that I used to do everything, set up hotels for meets, send out workouts, send out paper newsletters and envelopes to 350 lifters. I mean, luckily I was at a school situation where I had kids that could help me put all this stuff together. And of course, the internet came around, and so that really saved a
Yeah.
lot with that. But everything was centered out of my house. So now I can delegate. And I find it really hard to delegate because I don't trust people to do
Right.
exactly how I want it to be done
Sure.
or how I was doing it. And so that trust factor is huge between you and I. And so what we do, I think, is just something people can learn from. You hang out with good people and delegate to the right people, and don't be afraid of delegating as long as it's to the good people that you can trust. Because if you delegate a lot of these things, that opens up other things for everybody to do. I really appreciate what you guys have done. And like I said, we'll talk more about East Coast Gold in another podcast, but that was huge. Let's talk a little bit more about your coaching. Now, as far as your coaching other sports besides weightlifting, did you have anybody along the way that you want to shout out to and that was a big help, like in your baseball career or in high school? Are there any coaches that kind of led the way for you?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the most influential coaches besides you, Leo, obviously, is my
Thank you.
baseball coach in college. When I got to college, I was really immature and, thought way too highly of myself for sure. And then, getting there as a freshman at the Division I level was really eye-opening. I wasn't as good as I thought I was. I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and had a lot of emotional growing to do. And he was a really hard-nosed coach and held me accountable in every single way.
I've heard some stories where he had to kind of reprimand you a little bit every once in a while.
Almost every day.
Do you want to share that a little bit?
Oh, it was almost every day, but to my own fault, So, but we had a lot of rules. He was really old fashioned. We had to be clean shaven every day, and those were things that I didn't think mattered. But this is how he developed culture, and we talk a lot about culture within an organization, especially like why East Coast Gold has been successful and why it is what it is. It's because of the culture and the people, and that was his way of developing a culture. And I didn't understand that at the time, which most kids that age probably aren't going to, but that was what he was definitely trying to do. And yeah, there were many times I didn't shave and I didn't have the right equipment or the right shoes or this and that. And so I'd spend a lot of time running around the field and then catching bullpens and doing stuff like that instead of playing in the games. I've been taken out of the game multiple times for yelling obscenities if I struck out or throwing my helmet into the helmet rack and things like that. But
that doesn't surprise me at all. Doesn't surprise me at all.
But I grew up a lot. Yeah.
Well, people who are around you now at your lifting career, I learned a long time ago when you had a really good lift, you would come off and I would brace myself because the hugs, it almost knocked me over. And if you miss the lift, stay the hell out of the way.
That's right.
Because you don't handle misses very well. That's for sure.
Especially at that when I was younger. Yeah. I had a lot of emotional
even as an
growing up to do.
You were like, but that's all right. That's part of the personality, and that's the competitive fire too.
Sure.
And one of the things I had to do is make sure you didn't hurt yourself.
Right.
Don't kick that bar.
Don't expect too much energy. Expend too much energy. Yeah.
Save those knuckles.
Yeah. I'm not proud of it, but it is who I am. It's the same things that are negative or the same things that drive me to be, successful.
Exactly.
So.
That was what I was going to say is that, people got to know that about you, that you're a fiery guy, that's part of your personality, and maybe that's the Italian in you. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it could be.
So, but at the same time, one of the things I had to do was kind of keep that under control a little bit so you didn't hurt
Hmm.
yourself. And even the last couple of years when I wasn't actually doing your programming anymore, when you guys were at Virginia Beach, sorry about this voice, but one of the things I had to do, like Brendan would take care of all the numbers and stuff. I
Hmm.
was back with you, seeing you pacing back and forth,
Hmm.
trying to keep you a little bit more calm, keep you
Hmm.
relaxed. And so that was the teamwork,
Yeah,
So I was part of your motivational guy.
yeah, absolutely. Needed that.
So in the weightlifting world, are there any mentors or coaches you want to? I know you mentioned a
Of
couple
course,
already.
Joe. Yeah. I mean, I'm just super appreciative that Joe Fondale, saw potential in me and encouraged me to keep up with the sport and learn about it the right way and introduced me to you, who changed my life in so many ways, Leo, just with the sport, the training, understanding things like culture and but just so many things. I mean, so yeah, you guys, obviously, I'm super appreciative of that. And then, of course, what the support that I have here in Virginia Beach with Brendan, we've become best friends, but he also was someone who was able to hold me accountable here in person throughout my training. And he's always been super encouraging, and he's my right hand man when it comes to coaching with this team. And as I was going through my competitive part of lifting, he was so instrumental on holding me accountable in training and giving me ideas and developing strategies for upcoming months and years and things like that. So I'm super appreciative of him also.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask about with the balance of your coaching and your lifting at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. How did you do that?
I found it
How'd
to
you
be
manage?
pretty easy. I thought only because I love the sport so much, and I know you can attest to this, that I loved every second of it. I still do love every second of it. I love every second of training. And then I also get a chance afterwards to coach for a couple hours. And to me, like, that's a great day. Although it comes with its challenges, sure. And when the gym's really busy and you're running around a lot and you're doing a lot of demonstration and things like that, yeah, it's tiring, especially after you train for 2 hours. So
Yeah.
understanding that, and I think having learned when we were at VMI, when I was at VMI and you were holding me accountable to only train maybe 3 days a week, it gave me a really good understanding of how less a lot of times can be more depending on what the situation is that's presenting. So that was always the biggest challenge for me. I always had a lot more motivation than my body and my mind could handle. And so, learning that early from you was really instrumental.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's one of the things that I think balance is pretty important. So when you did your training before the coaching.
Hmm.
Is that how you
Yeah,
did it?
I would teach class in the morning, and then I'd head to the gym and I'd train for 2 hours, and then the team would come in and I'd coach from 3 to 7.
Did you
Coach
ever
from three to
train
seven.
with them?
Rarely. There were times that I did, like if we were getting close to competition and I wanted a little more of the atmosphere, I wanted to jump in there with them. We're getting ready for nationals, getting ready for American Open. I like to be an athlete on one of those days and not just a coach. So there were times where I'd do that, but further out from competition, I always try to take one hat off and put the other one on. I feel like everybody deserves that. If that's what their expectation is, and it should be, is they're expecting me to be the best coach that I can for them. And so if
Yeah.
I'm lifting, then I can't do that.
And I think that's important because I've seen coaches who train along with their athletes, and I think it's really hard to do both at the same time. I mean, either you're going to train or you're going to coach, but
Yeah.
to try to do them both, I think that really kind of smooths things out for both of you and doesn't
Both
really
and
challenge.
both aspects will suffer. Your training's not going to be
Exactly.
as good and your coaching's not going to be as good.
Well, speaking of balance, and not only just with your lifting, just explain to them about how you balanced your family life, and now your kids are in activities.
Yeah.
How do you juggle that?
That is the most challenging part of it. It's even a bigger challenge now as my kids are older. I can't be at the gym as much as I want. And I'm thankful that we have a really good culture at the gym, that everybody understands that. And they appreciate that I want to coach my son's baseball teams and I want to be with my family during these times. You know, when I first started coaching and the team was starting to grow, I was at the gym Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And that was all on top of my full-time job and my family and everything else that was going on at the time. I just had smaller kids and they weren't doing as much at the time. And now, as they started to get older, I had to back down my days at the gym and I'm not there as often. And like you said, put trust in great people and Brendan and Connor and Rachel and Steph and Emma and all these people that we've had in the gym that are able to help out. And that's part of it, you know, but that's what builds the culture. And that's another thing that I learned from you too, is that in order for things to progress, you have to coach coaches. You have to let good people do their thing. And I've been fortunate to have that here.
Well, you also have to have an understanding spouse.
Big time.
I can speak from experience on that. That's for sure.
Yes,
You got to have
absolutely.
somebody that's in your corner and has your back and understands what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's interesting because not a whole lot of people know my background, but I have 2 daughters. And when they were growing up, I was in your same situation. I was lifting, I was coaching, I was working, and we didn't miss anything of their activities in high school and stuff. And one of the things I was really proud of is that the fact that I thought maybe I was skimping out on the time, which I probably was, but evidently both my daughters are teaching physical education and coaching now. Maybe it had a positive influence, and maybe I wasn't as bad a guy as I thought I was. So, you know, the effort is there, and you can definitely see that with what you're doing, for sure.
Exactly. Erica, my wife, has been, God, so understanding, patient, and can appreciate my love for the team and the sport, and I've been really fortunate on that side. So.
Yep, that's for sure. You got to find the right spouse that knows what you're doing and why you're doing it. Now, this one's going to be kind of tough. Could you, as far as a coaching philosophy, your personal coaching philosophy, could you kind of summarize that in a few sentences?
That is a tough one.
It's a tough one.
I think it starts with culture, especially if you have a team or within an organization. Now, it's different, I guess, if you're coaching one-on-one, but I think culture is the most important. I think that's what drives teams, you know, like accountability from lifter to lifter or athlete to athlete, from coach to athlete, and all of that has to be in line. And so I think culture is number one. Aside from that, when it comes to training and weightlifting, I agree with you on what we were talking about earlier, that we have to be well-rounded as athletes. Putting too many eggs into one basket, although you think you might get a lot better at one thing, is going to take away from another thing. And then you find yourself in this endless spiral of adding and adding and adding. And all that's going to do is burn the athlete out and they will never physically adapt. And so I think from that standpoint, even though it's weightlifting, I will say that our programs are very strength and conditioning oriented. You know, we do a large amount of different things with mobility and plyometrics and weightlifting stuff, strength oriented stuff, and single leg, single arm work, and all of those things. And so that's what really drives development.
Evidently, your coaching philosophy is working. Okay, so we want to keep that going. What do you do when you have a brand new lifter coming in who's never trained at all?
We will start with the most basic foundational movements. In fact, we're doing that right now at the gym. We've had a handful of new people come in since it's the start of the new year. And so from a weightlifting standpoint, we will teach the squats first, general deadlift position, and an overhead press. We'll work to be proficient at that. And then from there, that's the foundation that builds progression. You know what I mean? So once we learn how to front squat, now we can effectively teach a power clean. Once we learn how to overhead press, we can effectively teach a jerk. Once we learn basic deadlifting position and things like that, then we can add a more challenging exercise like an RDL. And so all of these are built off of those foundational movements. And so that is where we typically start. When we get new lifters that come in the gym that have some experience, we have everybody go through a 6-week acclimation period. And it's a program that's written that's fairly challenging, but it's heavy based in positional work and positional awareness. And our goal there is to get on the same page with technique and terminology that we use that might be a little bit different than other coaches and other teams. But it also gives us as coaches a chance to see where the need is. So you may be really good in the high hang position or above the knee, but you're not very good from below the knee and from the floor. And so maybe that gives us some insight into what we need to work on moving forward. And so regardless of age or skill level, we have everybody go through that program so we can best progress them.
Once they get through the basic, do you individualize the workouts, or is there a set program that you do after they've done the foundational stuff?
After they do that acclimation phase, then yes, it'll be more individualized. It'll be if they have a need for a certain thing, like you can attest to this. God, we've written so many programs over the years. We've written stuff for just about every situation that's out there. And so if I make a note that this person needs more positional work, I have a block of programs that I use for that. If I notice that they just lack general strength, we have a large amount of programs for that because that tends to be the typical thing. And then those that lack some technique stuff and are still like more developmental, we have a large amount of stuff that we'll give through that. And then, keep assessing and reassessing as they continue to develop because those needs are going to change, and just keep continuing to encourage them to make these positive changes and keep going.
And I think that's a really important thing, is that I think sometimes there's a lot of what I call generic programming out on the internet where, you pay X amount of money and they send you a workout. Well, it may not necessarily be what you need. And I think that's one of the things that a good coach can do. They can say, hey, you need more leg strength, or you need more mobility work to be able to pull correctly off the floor, and individualize the programs based on their needs. And I think sometimes the generic programs don't really take that into account, and they don't take into account all the outside the lifting stresses. I had a guy one time, just a real quick story. He contacted me about his cleans were going down. They were actually decreasing, and he was frustrated. And I said, well, how are you doing your program? Well, I got this program online, and no lie, doing six days a week. 3 out of the 6 days were double sessions, front squatting and back squatting in the same one. No, that's not even the worst part. I said, well, tell me more about your personal life. He was 45 years old. He was in the military, worked 60 hours a week, and at the end of each month, he had a big physical fitness test he had to do.
Oh my gosh.
3 kids, ages 5, 3, and 1. And I'm like, when do you recover? And he goes, well, I don't really get a whole lot of chance. So that bingo, that doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But if you just get a generic program from somebody who doesn't know your background or doesn't, adjust the programming accordingly, it's not going to work. It's going to be okay for a few weeks until you get burnt out and then your lifts start going down. But you got to individualize. I think that's really important. And I don't think all coaches do that, but they should.
No. Yeah, I agree. And I also think people don't really understand how beneficial or how important and essential having some in-person coaching is, because in order to understand what the intention of the program is or the intention of the exercise, like it could just be snatch from hang. Okay, but what's the intention behind it for that specific lifter? And that's what a coach will be able to do. Snatch is just snatch, but snatch could be an infinite amount of varieties of snatch based on what the coach's intention is for the athlete. And so that's, I think, is one of the biggest missing pieces in the weightlifting world nowadays with the accessibility that people have to cheap online programming. You just don't really get the understanding or the intention behind the program.
Well, and I think one of the things that I look at is that, okay, we like to have a balance between the snatch and the clean and jerk. Okay, the snatch should be around 80% of your clean and jerk. Well, if it's 70%, part of that snatch is holding you back. Maybe it's the pull off the floor. Maybe it's the speed. Maybe it's the technique. Maybe it's the overhead lack of strength. Maybe it's the speed going under the bar. So that's what a good coach can eyeball and say, this is the problem. This is the cause of the problem. And you got to get that balance. So again, that's how you adjust the workout accordingly.
Absolutely.
And you can't do that without seeing them. It's one of the problems of remote coaching. I do some, and you do some. It's much better to be in person, obviously.
Yeah.
And not only just from a technique standpoint, but from a connection standpoint.
Yeah.
To get to know the person, which kind of leads me into my next question. From a competition standpoint, how did you prepare?
A lot of visualization, trying to relax as much as possible, which is really hard to do as you're getting close to the meet. and then just trying to get to the meet on time. I think one of the biggest mistakes, real quick note, I know we're running out of time, but I think one of the biggest mistakes is people start to panic as they get close to the meet and they feel like they have to cram. They have to like cram for the test. I need to do more snatches this week going into the meet because last week or 2 weeks ago I didn't hit what I wanted to hit or something like that. And that wasn't the meet. We taper for a reason. Things are going to be different. You need to get yourself to the meet on time, fresh, healthy, and in a good headspace. And, as challenging as that is to do, a lot of times it means you have to do less and you need to relax. And that was something that I really learned from you. You got to chill out. And when it's time, turn it on, but it's not time yet. You can't keep lifting the meet over and over and over again in your head 5 days, 2 weeks, a month before you even get to the meet.
The adrenaline when you get on the platform is gone. When you,
Yes.
if you don't, if you don't
Completely
control
exhausted, emotionally.
I remember
and
some of the
mentally
conversations with you, like 10 days out from a national meet, and you say, man, I don't feel good. I just feel like crap. I said, be patient, understand the process. The tapering's going to work.
Yep.
By the time the meet gets there, that super compensation will set in. You'll be good to go.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you relax, have that positive mindset and understand that. And, you got to trust the coach too.
Trust all the work that you put in. You didn't get weaker. It's impossible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And at that point, I think it's probably just as much mental as it is physical.
Absolutely.
And I think that mindset is really, really important. And you learn to handle that really well. And I think when you do that, you're going to have a lot more success on the platform.
Definitely.
And the visualization
more
you're talking
consistent.
about, practice that earlier. Don't wait till the week of the meet to start visualizing.
Yeah.
Because when I first started doing that, when I would visualize, I'd see mislifts in my head. Well, you don't want that. It takes practice to learn how to do it in your head correctly.
Sure.
Then you can correlate to what you're going to do on the platform.
That's right.
So, just watching you prepare, I think is important. And do you work with your athletes on trying to develop that same mindset?
Yes. And it's a constant battle. Even, some of the athletes that have been lifting for years, and I can say even for myself too, still would have feelings of panic going into the meet. But once we got there, for the most part, consistent in performance. And so I think the hardest thing going into the meet from a coach's standpoint is trying to get your athletes to understand what the process is and that it's okay that you might be feeling this way. And we just have to get to the meet, and don't try to beat yourself up too much before you get there because the meet hasn't happened yet. You haven't lifted in the meet yet. So just trying to get the athletes there on time and to help them understand that is pretty challenging. But
well, and I think that's what a good coach does. It's not just about the training part, or not just about, rah, let's get this competition going. It's like how you develop that mindset, how you get your athletes to develop that mindset.
Sure.
And I think you've done a wonderful job with it. The only problem is, okay, you may not even know this, some of your lifters try too hard just to please you.
Oh,
they do. Because they talk to me about it. I don't know if they talk to you about it. And I said, you got to do it for you.
That's right.
Okay? Phil's going to be disappointed for you.
I feel bad for them. Because I know what that feels like. We know what that feels like.
Absolutely.
And I feel bad for them. And I feel like I didn't do a good enough job as a coach when an athlete doesn't perform well. So if they only knew how much it hurts the coach, when an athlete doesn't perform bad, not because we're upset with them. We feel bad for them and maybe feel like we didn't do enough.
Exactly. A couple of the athletes, and you probably know a couple of them that I'm talking about, they have said, oh man, I didn't want to disappoint Phil. But that shows the good connection that you have with them.
Yeah.
But they also have to understand, hey, you got to separate that. They're doing it for themselves.
Right.
And you're doing it to make
your
them
best.
better. And when they don't succeed, you feel bad for them. Okay.
Yes.
You're not mad at them.
No.
You feel bad because you want to see them succeed just as bad as they do.
I respect the challenges. It's a hard sport. All sports are hard. I mean, there's winners and losers in every game. You know? So that's
for sure. Well, I think we're at about the 50-minute mark, and we could go on and on and on. Phil, this has been awesome. I mean, it's just like talking to my brother. I guess it's my son. But no, it's always really good. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. People don't understand how hard it was to schedule between you and me and Cait. And unfortunately, Cait couldn't make it today because I know she really wanted to hear all this stuff as well. But we'll definitely set up a second one to talk more about how East Coast Gold developed, more about what your huge role is in that, and not only as an athlete but as a coach and a mentor and a friend to me.
The best part.
A lot of the duties and all that I did, I couldn't release that to anybody but you. So I really appreciate that, and all the things you've done at your gym in Virginia Beach with Brendan and Connor and all the good lifters. They're just all good people. After a meet, we go out and have a few drinks and a few laughs, and just that's what a team does. So we are a team by all recommendations. So, but if there's anything we can ever do for you, Phil, to help out, because you're the first guest we've had on this podcast. What's that tell you?
I love it. Thank you.
But unfortunately, you're so good, we got to bring you back.
Sounds good. Anytime.
Yeah,
Thank you, Leo. We appreciate
thanks
you.
a lot, Phil. And I hope everybody enjoyed this podcast, and keep on listening. And if you have any questions on anything, you can contact me at info@tottentraining.com. My phone number's out there. My email is leo@tottentraining.com. Phil, do you want to give out your information?
Sure. Check out on Instagram, East Coast Gold, which is at East Coast Gold WL. And then you can find me on there as well at Philly Sab.
Okay. And if anybody wants contact with Phil, I'm telling you, you're going to be in good hands if he's going to be one of helping you. I like to think you're in good hands with me too, but we have very similar philosophies. So either one of us, we're more than willing to help out, and we love coaching and we love helping athletes. So again, thank you very much, Phil. Thanks to the audience, and we will definitely be in touch. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care now.